Welcome back to Unleashed with Mark Morano on TNT. We're continuing our discussion with free market economist Michael Austin of Project 21. I want to go back, first of all, the COVID lockdowns that happened in pretty much every liberal city in the country, and a lot of conservative cities. Not that there are any conservative cities that I'm aware of. I guess maybe small ones, or maybe out in North Dakota or something. But um, there was a huge concentration of wealth. There were more billionaires created than any other time during COVID lockdowns, largest transfer of wealth from the poor middle class to the billionaire class and the wealthy. A lot of mom and pop restaurants went under. And of course, the big corporations, the big retail chains, all huge profits, big tech, Amazon, Walmart, profits through the roof. The small mom and pops crushed. What impact did that have on America, on the middle class, on African Americans, on blue collar workers, and how do we recover from that legacy?
Well, let me first off, start off by saying, when COVID hit back in 2020, no one really understood, at least at the very onset, what this disease would do to people, what it would do to the economy. So I personally give a little grace period, for the first 2 weeks, where people just didn't know what was going on. But then after that, when it was clear that, COVID was, really hurting those who are over the age of 65, those who already had significant comorbidities, there really wasn't a need for any of this sort of lockdown policy. And yet they persisted in certain places in the country. And you want to talk about how it transferred wealth from mom and pop shops to big businesses. That definitely happened. But what I particularly noticed is how that certain decision making process, what should government do, that should be a conversation between elected leaders and their constituents. That didn't happen during COVID, right? We had bureaucrats after bureaucrats after bureaucrats in some little back office making a decision and picking winners over losers, right? Saying that this business is going to, allow to produce, other businesses, other industries, we're going to allow them to shut down. And they did it all without the American public's permission. And that was one of the biggest travesties. Yes, you have the economic recession, but you also have the miscarriage of democracy, right? Where these bureaucrats are making these decisions without the input of the people. And then, of course, you have the fact that I said before, it's like taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut, right? Where you realize the amount of force needed to combat COVID was so extreme. In my home state of Kansas, I believe businesses were shut down about, I thought 30% of Kansas businesses were shut down during the lockdown. And then you realize that, you swung that sledgehammer to crack the nut and you missed the nut. So the only thing that ever happened was all this economic damage, and you never even solved the problem in the first place. And I think it just goes to show that
Abortion clinics being open and churches closed. And they had somehow, as you mentioned, unelected bureaucrats made these decisions, and it made sense to them somehow, right? And I guess if you were destroying a country and a culture, it would make sense. Okay, let me switch over now to George Floyd. In June, if I'm pretty sure, unless it was May, but it's June or May or June of 2020. I believe it was June of 2020. You had the unfortunate death of George Floyd, and I'm not going to get into that. But the reaction to that from the liberals, from the Biden supporters, Biden wasn't elected yet, in all these big cities, to honor and fight, to honor African Americans and to fight the legacy of racism, you had a whole movement put forward to allow the riots in the city. And of course, they were justified during lockdowns, because if you're rioting, if you're out for violating social distance for social equity, then apparently there's no virus threat. But more importantly, the defund the police movement was done as an effort to essentially help African Americans. How did all that turn out for African Americans?
it turned out horribly. I mean, it turned out absolutely horribly. You're telling me that in order to keep communities safe, you need to remove law enforcement? I mean, that's the type of contradictory, hypocritical stuff that you unfortunately see all the time from, the far left. And, you talk about it happening in June of 2020, we in America, we call that the summer of love, sarcastically, because, there was so much property damage, so much fire damage, so much riots, people were beaten, people were killed. How does that protect the community? If you're an African American small business owner, you were worried that your shop was going to get broken into because of what happened, to George Floyd, with the police. And it has nothing to do with why your business is burning down. But this is what happens when you allow lawlessness to pervade a system and economy. And it's very similar to what we're seeing with the migrant crisis here in America. Once again, Joe Biden, instead of cracking down on crime or shutting down the southern border, he's allowing, people to be irresponsible. He's allowing people to commit crime and horrible atrocities, and he's not providing any consequences. And just like how it happened in 2020 and it's happening now, it's going to allow crime to pervade itself, and no one is going to be better off. We're all going to lose.
And what about the sort of the corporate virtue signaling, NFL, NBA, Black Lives Matter, end racism in the end zone? Does that help end racism? That kind of
No,
corporate messaging?
no, no, not at all. Not only does it not help end racism, it actually pervades it, right? The one thing about, racism, if you want it to really end, you got to stop talking about it, and just, treat people by the content of their character. But what these corporations were doing is they're trying to placate to that, woke mentality because they see the riots and they want to avoid that. But on the other side of the coin, most Americans don't respond to that. I mean, look at Disney. Disney has yet to really see, let's say, a success, a smash hit with its movies. They're seeing declining attendance in their theme parks. Why? Because everything that Disney seems to be putting out seems to be having this woke, racist, or LGBT message on it, and people are naturally turning away because it feels like it's being forced down their throats. So the beauty about capitalism, at least, is that you can still speak with your wallet. And hopefully more and more businesses realize that if they go down this woke agenda, they're going to go broke. And that is in no one's best interest.
Well, in terms of the green agenda and its impact, you have Joe Biden now pushing the Inflation Reduction Act. And rather than just saying, okay, let energies compete, solar and wind, and EVs can compete against gas-powered cars, solar wind can compete against fossil fuels, they're banning energy that works, regulating it, trying to regulate it out of existence. They're doing it very successfully with coal. They're raising the cost of energy for everyone. But in their minds, that's good because we're using too much energy anyway. What impact does that have disproportionately on blue-collar workers, on the poorest Americans?
One of the examples I can easily think of is the fact that these car manufacturers that are being pushed to create more EVs, electric vehicles, they're doing it outside of America, right? So you have a job loss, whereas a production facility could have been in America producing cars. Now, thanks to Joe Biden pushing EVs, they're deciding to go to Mexico to produce those cars. So that's job loss. And then second thing is, those workers who still work for those manufacturers or still work for those car companies, they're going to see less income because no one's buying electric vehicles. You watch TV, you see all these commercials for EV this, hybrid that, no gas, no gas car doing this and X, Y, and Z. But while they're all there, no one is really buying it because, the economics says that as you produce more and more electric vehicles, gas-powered cars now become cheaper. And so, Americans who are trying to save money still don't feel like it's worth paying $40,000 to $50,000 on an electric vehicle, but they'll still spend $20 or $20,000 on a gas-powered vehicle. So, it just goes to show once again, not only the contradictory and hypocritical use of these policies, but they just don't follow general economics because people just want their life to be cheaper, and they're going to follow whichever path gets them there the quickest.
All right. Well, yeah, we're in an election year. We already know Joe Biden has told, and I can't remember what show he told, it was a black host who said, if you're supporting Donald Trump, you ain't black. Is that true? Are African Americans less black if they support Donald Trump? I tried. I couldn't say it with a straight face. I tried. Okay.
No, no. Now, Project 21, we don't try to get
Don't
into
endorse candidates. Yeah.
we don't endorse candidates. No, we do speak to policies, and of
Yeah.
course, I do try to promote policies that I believe are more free market based than, let's say, government control. And ever since I've been doing that, I've been doing that for now at least 10 years. I really haven't changed my skin tone. So I don't know what Joe Biden is thinking about what he can about that statement, but it's clearly not true. And I think most Americans, look, they may like certain personalities over another, but ultimately they prefer, whoever makes it easier for them to live their own lives. And history has shown that more free market or more traditional conservative policies can get that done. Making government more limited, smaller, out of your hair, just naturally does that as well. And clearly, what they're seeing under Joe Biden is that when you do the opposite, when you get government so massive and so big, it's into almost every facet of your life, it makes life harder.
All right. Well, we only have about, I guess, a minute left, but are you at all concerned as an economist from the yin yang aspect? You go from Obama, then Trump swings the government, cuts regulations, then back to Biden, and then we might go back to Trump. How does the economy handle those kind of regulatory sweeps from back and forth, from massive government intrusion to radical cutbacks?
I remember back to the founding of the U.S. Constitution, the framing of it, right? They understood that there would be different political parties winning the presidency over history and over time. But what their goal is to really give the seat of power to Congress, to the legislature, or to the Congress or to state legislatures. And we've gotten so far from that. We put so much power into the presidency. It really does lead to such wild volatilities depending on who gets in. So I guess my thought process to that is, it doesn't matter whether there's a Republican in charge or a Democrat in charge, you have to give more power back to Congress.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Austin, we're out of time from Project 21. This is Unleashed with Mark Morano. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.